Good afternoon, and welcome back to our afternoon session. And I'm really happy that you have joined us. Our speakers thus far have been phenomenal, and I hope you've been enjoying them as much as I have. So, during this panel, our presenters will be speaking about existing collaborations and/or programs along educational pathways, as well as undergraduate to graduate education and beyond, topics that I'm sure we are all very interested in. The first speaker to join us is Sandra Begay. Sandra, the daughter of a Navajo tribal leader and a public health nurse, is a member of the Navajo Nation, and she has been an engineer for 33 years. Shout out to all women engineers. Sandra has worked at Sandia National Laboratories for 30 years, where she is a research and development engineer. Sandra, thank you for joining us and welcome to the stage.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a great honor to be with you today. I'm going to immediately just go into the topic that I've been asked to speak about. When we talk about our students in STEM and underrepresented minorities, I think they've made it through a big gauntlet to be at that stage in their academic career. So one way I've found through the work that I've been able to do at a national laboratory is to think very creatively how to support those students who are uniquely situated that they could have some enhanced learning. So my talk today will focus in on an internship program that I created. And it's been around for 20 years. I just have to think back that time has gone by so quickly. I'll just start from the beginning. I was doing a lot of work at Sandia Labs, focused in on Indian energy development for renewable energy projects. And I was one and only. I only had enough money for myself. And I decided that I needed some help. And at the National Lab, to get another staff member on board is a lot of budget that you need. And I thought creatively, and hiring interns is a very easy thing to do. And so I picked my first intern. I found her. Her name is Debbie Tewa. She had installed solar energy on the Hopi Nation out in Arizona. And Debbie happened to be in school working on her bachelor's degree at Northern Arizona University. So I just approached her and recruited her and said, come work with me. We're going to have a lot of fun. Let's figure out what to do. And that was the start. What the next stage was is trying to develop more than one is, well, my budget could handle maybe a few more, but at some point, after a couple years of success having students over the summer, I approached my sponsor and said, you know, in my budget, it pays for me as the technical assistance provider, but I'm actually hiring some students to help me within my existing budget. Wouldn't it be great if we could add to my budget so I can pay for interns in their own separate line within my budget? And very grateful to my sponsor for thinking out of the box. And he said, sure, let's do this. In Indian country with Native Americans in STEM, it's been a wonderful way of doing some things out of the box. I think the other that I would like to encourage you that when you have the students that have already been successful as sophomores, juniors, seniors in undergraduate school, I think they need enhanced learning with personal experience. So in the internship that I offer, it's all hands-on. We go out to the tribes and study what is successful for these renewable energy projects. And the students travel to the tribal reservations and learn directly from the project leads the aspects of that project. So having that high touch with the students who are tribal members, who have me as their mentor, going out into the field, talking to people who have real projects in real time, just adds that level of they're ready to be STEM professionals and support renewable energy, tribal projects, nonprofits, academia. My students are all in these areas and they're very successful. I think the other thing I'll share, just because I know you're trying to learn about how to support these students, is you'll have to defend why you've made something narrow. So for me, I was able to find some language in the Energy Policy Act that created the Department of Energy's Office of Indian Energy, which says we're supporting Indian country in human capacity building. And so those words resonated with me, and that's how I made them my justification. if I hire students who are already in school and they have the credentials, or they're almost having their credentials with their bachelor's degree, why not give them that experience so they can run once they're done with their degree? Now, I expanded to add graduate students, and that's where I've had a real focus. I've been supportive of the graduate students by being a part of their committees for their dissertations, if it's a PhD, or their master's thesis. In that sense, I get more detailed into their academic career by helping them get credit for the work that they did in their internship. They write technical papers, and I try to support them from the academic side that their work is so unique that there's only a few students that would be able to be a part of such a program. Now, I've been told that I cherry pick, and I don't mind having that said about me, because the mission of my sponsor and my work really focuses in on a true need that we have within the US. And right now, that need for supporting energy development, communities in needs, and tribes across the United States is just at a heightened level. So the internship I'm creating, which supports the undergraduate and graduate students, really has gotten national attention. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge that internships, as was talked in the last panel, are so important. But I would advise that if you're going to have an intern, or you're going to be a mentor to an intern, realize that our minority students don't have as much work experience as maybe a person of the majority society of the United States. They may not have grown up with these systems that they expect to know once they're on the job. I'll give you a specific example. I hired a young student out of Northern Michigan who had never left his home community. He was a freshman in college. He'd never worked before. And I brought him into Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I had to start from scratch about the workplace. He called me about what kind of clothes to wear, and I was really honest with him. Engineers at where I work, we tend to dress business casual. I defined what that is, and he bought new clothes for the workplace. So on day one, he was ready to look just like everybody else in the workplace, and he felt very good about, being ready. Another tribal college student that I had, you have to be ready for these questions. He was afraid to tell me that he'd gotten an extra check from Sandia National Labs. And I said, why aren't you cashing that? He said, I think they made a mistake. I'm afraid. Literally, he was afraid of that check. And I said, you've got to deposit that check, because that's reimbursing you for your travel. So when I talk about nurturing and mentoring, it's at that level to students who have no experience with these systems that we call, corporate environments, academic environments, a workplace. You can't assume that they know a lot of these aspects to fit in with the workplace, but also feel comfortable, not just fit in, but feel comfortable. I also had a funny comment that I'll just mention. I hire Native American students. That's a part of my goals and my sponsor's goals. And someone said, oh, that must be one of Sandra's interns. And I said, why did you say that? He said, because he looks like a Native American. He's got really long black hair. And I said, well, not only does he look Native American, he is Native American. And yes, you've got it right. They have to be comfortable in who they are. There is no way I would tell a man with long hair that you need to do this or that with your hair. That's just not acceptable. And these kinds of nuances are very important to understand when you're going to build an internship program, or you're going to mentor interns, especially for underrepresented minorities. I think it's just key that you're there to enhance their academic learning and help them, as I have learned, to swim as fast in the deep end of the pond. And I always remind my interns, I'm there to help. I'm always available. And I think that rapport I built with my interns has helped them to be very good professionals and to be able to understand what it's going to take to work in a professional capacity. I also remind them, just because of the nature of the work, that their participation, their work tasks are so important for our constituencies, the Native American communities, that we've got to be able to convey what many people don't understand about tribes and their needs for clean energy. So the mission itself, they understand. And if they can build that thought in their technical experience, they will always have the heart and the passion for the work. And I've seen that through the success of what they have done beyond graduate school. And at last, I'll just say I was gifted and blessed to have some PhD students and to have them write dissertations about what it's like to do successful projects in Indian country and go about how to enhance all the challenges to do this kind of work has risen to a national level, that their publication is known in Indian country, and it's shown that a dissertation can make a difference in renewable energy projects and such. So I'm running out of time, but I'm going to be available for questions and answers after the panel. And again, thank you so much. I'm blessed to be here today and be a part of the prestigious work of the National Academy of Engineering.
Sandra, thank you so much for that engaging and informative discussion. We all have a lot more to learn about internships. I really appreciate your talking about helping our students through working on their dissertation committees and or their master's thesis committees and facilitating their educational growth in that area. I want to remind everyone to please, please, please post any questions you have in the Q&A section. And at the end of our session today, we'll have 4 speakers. And after the 4th speaker has finished their presentation, we'll have 20 minutes for questions and answers. So please post your questions in the Q&A tab for us for later on. I really appreciate it. And our next speaker is Brendan Marcano. And Brendan is going to be continuing our discussion on programs that address decision-making and transition from undergraduate to graduate school. So Brendan is the Chief Executive Officer of the National GEM Consortium. Brendan has over 20 years of experience in the private and nonprofit sectors. His leadership experience spans multiple industries, primarily financial services, technology, and media and entertainment. Welcome to the stage, Brendan.
Thank you, Adrienne. First off, I'd like to thank the National Academy of Engineering for giving me an opportunity to present here today on a model that supports the transition from undergraduate to graduate degrees, that being the GEM model. And so thank you all for giving me the opportunity to do this. Next slide, please. I'd like to first talk about why GEM exists before we get specifically into the model. And so the vision of GEM is one of scientific impact. One more click and the words will come up. Thank you. Our vision is scientific impact, and all the iterations and formations of what that science looks like, and ultimately the impact being able to make the world a better place. But that is our sole focus, one of scientific impact. Next slide, please. We support that vision through our mission, which is really about empowering individuals to achieve their fullest potential in STEM. And through that mission, there is a model that GEM ascribes to, sort of the ingredients of the mission, which goes like this. First, we believe that by convening the best minds, those that ascribe to the academic rigor, that are also committed to science. And we see no better indicator of that commitment to science than wanting to make that transition from undergraduate to more advanced study. And folks that come from diverse backgrounds. So bringing these great minds committed to science that come from diverse perspectives. And obviously, the research has shown that diverse groups outperform their homogeneous counterparts. And so you're building that formula for success, but obviously the last part of the component being a nurturing environment, because you can have really smart folks committed to science and bringing together diverse perspectives, but if they're not in a nurturing environment, it will challenge the innovation spectrum. And so we firmly believe that in support of that vision, by pulling these components together, you're stimulating innovation and ultimately scientific impact. Next slide, please. So who is GEM? Because I keep saying we. Well, GEM is made up of the top schools in the country, top 50 engineering schools Ivy Leagues, HBCUs, they've all been part of the consortium in many instances for decades. So this slide is a little old. It's now over 130 of the top universities in the country, and about 70 major corporations. So if you click again, about 70 major corporations. I like to say the names that we know and love. Obviously, I couldn't put all of them on the slide, but you're talking about STEM. So you'll see organizations that span multiple industries. Over on the Valley side, you'll see the Intels and the IBMs and the Amazons and the Qualcomms, et cetera. The list of usual cast of characters. But over in manufacturing, you'll see the 3Ms and the Fords. In pharma, you'll see Johnson & Johnson and Merck. The majority of the DOE national labs are part of GEM. And so you get a sprinkling of organizations across multiple industries. But these close to 200 institutions not only share that vision of scientific impact, but they believe, just as the mission states, that one of the best ways to achieve that scientific impact is by creating high-performing, diverse groups. Next slide, please. So real quick, as we talk about what is that value proposition that, thank you. What is that value proposition for GEM? Well, there are four main components. The first is superior quality. At the end of the day, no one questions the quality of a GEM fellow, and it is reflected by their average GPAs, but more importantly, by the success of alums that have gone through the program. From the fact that 50% of minority female deans of engineering schools in the country right now are GEM alums, and a fair amount of their male counterparts as well, a couple of which are actually presidents of school right now. And many of them have been inducted into the National Academy of Engineering, most recently President Darrell Pines from the University of Maryland. The second value proposition that we see often is the ability for ease of use. For all of our organizations, access in these students and the talent is available right through our online platform. And so we try to make ourselves the easy button to access this high caliber talent. The next value proposition is cost. As a nonprofit 501c3, many of our organizations engage with us from a philanthropic perspective. And so there's a price arbitrage opportunity through that model. And then finally, it's a sustainable model. GEM has been around going on close to 50 years now. And so even though the core of the model is supporting entry-level talent, through the alumni, you're able to access both mid to senior level individuals to create that more robust, diverse ecosystem, because the middle managers organically become mentors for entry-level talent, and the senior execs become sponsors for all. Next slide, please. So real quick, what exactly is the GEM model that supports that undergrad to grad transition? And so we sort of ascribe to three approaches that we have found really supports the push in making that decision and transition from undergrad to grad. Those three pinions are what we call breaking some of the mental barriers, some of the perceptions that we see at the undergrad level, providing that financial support to enable that transition, and obviously integrating individuals into a robust community that can help them succeed through those pathways. And so I'm going to just touch on each of those components now. Next slide, please. So GEM does something called Grad Labs, which stands for Getting Ready for Advanced Degree Lab Workshops. One more click. Getting Ready for Advanced Degree Lab Workshops. Under Grad Labs, it really is designed to raise the awareness of the importance of pursuing an advanced degree. And through that process, and doing it over a couple of years now, we've seen some of the perceptions that need to be recalibrated in speaking to a lot of students at the undergrad level that may be considering graduate school. And so I just thought I'd highlight some of the three most common ones. One of them is a PhD is only good if I want to be a professor. And so we help students understand that with a PhD, you are now the subject matter expert, and you can actually do anything you want to do with that qualifications. The next is that I need to start working now to build a proper career trajectory. And so we explain to individuals that actually with a PhD or with a master's degree even, there's anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million difference in your financial situation career-wise. And then, of course, last but not least is financially, many individuals are strapped when they have completed their undergraduate degree. And so being able to entertain a conversation of continuing their education is sometimes a real challenge. And so we explain to them that through the GEM model, pursuing an advanced degree is free. And in many instances, because there is an internship component attached to it, you're actually getting paid to pursue your advanced degree. And so once we've sort of broken these mental barriers, we do pre and post surveys for our grad labs. And 85% of seniors that attend our grad labs go on to apply for graduate school. Next slide, please. Of course, the next part, which is equally important, is actually providing those financial pathways. Because again, as I stated, financial constraints are often one of the things that challenge, one of the primary things that challenge students in making that transition. And so the GEM model ultimately is a partnership, a marriage between industry and academia who come together. And I put the government there as well, because in many instances, especially when we work through NSF, they're also acting as industry partners to join into this marriage. It is a marriage between these entities to financially support an individual to be able to pursue their master's or PhDs. And so, and I've mentioned before sort of the value propositions as to why primarily corporations do this, you know, the superior quality, the price points, etc. But the same exists for universities as well. Universities are interested in this for diverse student populations, as well as access to diverse faculty down the road. Next slide. And of course, finally, the community support. We know that there's lack of diversity in STEM, and that the other phenomena is that many folks look for mentors that look like themselves. So ultimately, you see that challenge for underrepresented minorities as they're coming up the STEM ranks. By joining the GEM Fellowship Program, you're immediately inducted into a 45-year legacy of STEM practitioners. And so through that process, you're actually able to identify and connect with individuals that have traversed pathways that you may be interested in. And so that's one of the reasons why GEM actually received a presidential award most recently for our commitment towards STEM mentorship. Of course, sponsorship is also another aspect of this. Individuals walking into corporations, we'll see alums that are already there that can actively sponsor them and ensure that they're on the right career trajectory path. And of course, finally, it's a 45-year community. And so it's a place where you can actually let your guard down and be yourself and be nurtured with like-minded people. Next slide, please. And so finally, I just wanted to say sort of future thinking for the GEM model. GEM spends a lot of time, as I said, with that undergrad to graduate transition. And even though we educate folks on the pathways towards industry, academia, and entrepreneurship, there is an opportunity for us to sort of double down on pathways beyond the masters and PhDs and ensure that folks can integrate within industry, integrate within academia, or pursue their own pathways towards entrepreneurship in meaningful ways. And these are areas that we're slowly building out as the organization grows, so that when someone is considering that transition from undergrad to grad school, they understand that coming with that transition is actually a fairly robust roadmap that can lead to viable careers. And so once again, I thank the Academy for inviting me to share this at this workshop. And I relinquish the floor back to our moderator. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Brennan, for that fabulous talk. And it was great to hear more about the GEM program and all the benefits of becoming a GEM fellow. The benefits of becoming a fellow are tremendous. And Brennan, if it were not for what I assume may be an age limit, I might apply. But I'm quite sure I've aged out of that process. Students your way, I promise.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for sharing with us, Brennan. Again, I would like to remind you to please post any questions you have in the Q&A section. The participants will be happy to address your questions at the end of our session today. So our next speaker is Dr. Stephen Crossley. Dr. Crossley received his PhD in chemical engineering from the University of Oklahoma in 2009. In August of 2011, Dr. Crossley University of Oklahoma as an assistant professor and was later, quickly, I should say, promoted to associate professor in 2017. Dr. Crossley is going to talk to us today about programs that address graduate school retention. Thank you and welcome to the stage, Dr. Crossley.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm incredibly humbled, especially given the outstanding quality of the panelists here. So I'm going to speak about something that is a very challenging landscape to navigate, and from a somewhat unique perspective. So I'm an associate professor in the chemical engineering program, but I'm also a faculty advisor for our ACES program, of which our first speaker on the panel has been an outstanding member of that community. So ACES is short for the American Indian Science and Engineering Society, which the University of Oklahoma was one of a handful of organizations that founded this many years ago, and it's grown into an incredible support network to help Native American students to become successful in STEM fields. Next slide, please. So my role as a faculty advisor of our local ACES chapter is really one of an encourager of some of the outstanding students that we have. I'm going to show you some statistics in the following slides, but we are very fortunate, generally given some of the local demographics in the state and some of the surrounding states, that we just have some outstanding students that decide to pursue engineering in this area. And so these are just some snapshots over the years from our local club, which is just one of many organizations within ACES. But if you choose any of these pictures and look at some of these students, it is back with just a few years' time to reflect what they've gone on to do. In each of these images, there's a student or two who has gone on to graduate school, and they've all navigated their own path, and they're going to be, if they're not already there, they're quickly on their way to becoming leaders in their area. In each of these pictures, there are people who have gone on to PhD programs, master's degree programs, things like that. So I'm incredibly proud of the groups that we have here at Oklahoma, the things that they do. One thing I'm very passionate about is trying to help enable some of these students who are fully capable of going on to be leaders and going on to graduate school to try to help reduce some of those barriers for them. And we've heard some outstanding programs already along the way to help students transition from wherever they're coming from, be it high school to college, or from two-year institutions to undergraduate institutions, as well as the amazing GEM fellowships and things like that to help them pursue their dreams and ultimately go to graduate school and support them during that path. So I'm not going to speak so much about the GEM, because we obviously have a much more qualified moderator or a person on this panel who can speak to that. But I do want to reflect on one thing, which is the challenge. So if you go to the next slide, please. This is just some statistics just to show you a little bit of the challenge that we are somewhat faced with when we think about enabling a nice environment for students who are fully capable themselves of being incredible graduate students and finishing their graduate school and being very successful in the future. The statistics are somewhat daunting. So this is on the left, we have the population. So I think we saw in the last panel, or in the last section of this workshop, that some statistics were provided for all the different groups. Native Americans around the U.S. population make up around 1%. In the state of Oklahoma, and the same is true in New Mexico and Arizona and other areas where the concentrations is a lot higher. So we have quite a few really good potential students that end up going to either the two-year, the tribal college, or even the four-year institutions. And a lot of them who end up choosing engineering end up coming here. So this is what puts us in a unique position to encounter some of these bright potential students. But one thing that is somewhat daunting is if you look at these statistics, the 1% of these students go on, or 1% of the population, which is much higher around where we are here. But if you look at the percentage of bachelor's degrees in engineering awarded. Now we're down to 0.3%. And what usually doesn't even show up on the tables is the percentage of doctoral degrees awarded to Native Americans. And just as an example, in 2020, that number was 12. So in any given years, it could be some number that you can count on your hands. And this is across all disciplines of engineering. So that means there's a lot of sub-disciplines in engineering where there will be 0 degrees awarded in a given year to a Native American. So it's around 0.1%. This is something that is obviously a challenge, and the question is, how do we go about doing that? Because we're definitely not at a shortage for bright people, and there's some amazing programs out there to help incentivize things like this. But one thing that makes it unique, and one thing that makes this a challenging problem is that for any sort of group, and this has been echoed by some of the other panelists and moderators and things, is that there needs to be some sort of a sense of community. And whenever you are the only student in a program, or you're the only one who is within your ethnic group, that makes it that much more challenging. Next slide, please. So I'm gonna speak about some of the programs that I'm not the one who can take claim for any of these. I'm just a faculty advisor who helps to steer students towards these programs that are amazing. So I'm just going to highlight a few of them that I think are worthwhile. The GEM Fellowship is one that I didn't mention, but is amazing. And I know they're active in the ACES meetings as well. One that ACES has started with the help of some support also through National Science Foundation funding is this Lighting the Pathway program. So this is in order, the whole goal of this is to connect students with nice mentors. So it's not a tremendous amount of funding that goes to these students, but it helps to create a bit of culture and to connect people with outstanding people that can guide them along the way. And we've heard many different stories of how this can be challenging if you are truly a minority. In many of these cases, I know some of our own students have gone to programs and pursued their PhD, and they are the only Native American in their college. That makes it challenging. So creating that network is truly essential. Scholars who enter this Lighting the Pathway program, they get a small stipend to participate, which is wonderful. They get lots of support to travel. So traveling to conferences where they can have some sense of community, like the ACES National Conference, which is just an outstanding event, as well as the Leadership Summit that happens once a year, which is also really nice. And in addition to this, they get some funding to incentivize their travel to a discipline-specific conference. This is a really nice program that exists for these students, and they pair them. The most important thing, I think, is pairing these students with a nice faculty mentor that can help lead them through these various challenges, and also being someone to help give them advice and help them have a sense of community along their journey. Next slide, please. There are many other opportunities within the American Indian Science and Engineering Society where support and help for these students to pursue their goals is attained. One is in the regional. Within our own, we will have regional conferences around the state and in the region. Every year we try to hold a research night. This is something I've been really excited about, where I try to get all of the graduate students that might be pursuing their degrees and have them give their own takes, along with ideally we try to get someone who's a famous member of maybe the ACES National Board or something, which I know Sandra has been a part of before. But if someone is in town and participating in the meeting, having them share with all the students why research is important, some of the exciting things they've learned along the way, and kind of create a sense of community, but not just for the undergraduates, for the graduate students involved as well. Nationally, there are many opportunities for them to promote their research by presenting their research, discussing among some of their peers and colleagues at the national meeting and the Leadership Summit that happens every year. Within those, there are both technical sessions as well as many other specific things geared towards career building. So for example, I participated in several tenure track workshops guiding people who might be thinking about going down an academic path, and lighting the pathway sessions, etc. Next slide, please. Another really exciting program is the Lewis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation. They have a sub-cohort, which is the Bridge to Doctorate program. Now, this program varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction because this is basically small zones will apply for funding and they handle it differently. In Oklahoma, what they've done is over the last LSAMP Bridge to Doctorate is they've awarded a handful of scholars and given them a sizable stipend, $32,000 per year for the first 2 years. That gives them an opportunity to then get into a nice PhD program. And that's accompanying with a variety of nice workshops and things like that. Those students have a much higher retention rate than the other minority students. One of the things that has come from this, and I will just touch on this very, very briefly, is that has led our college and our personal university to reflect. And I know that the next speaker will talk about this more. So I'm just going to speak of this in a few seconds. If you go to the next slide, please, of ways to educate our faculty. One thing that has come out of this from a university level is that our faculty need to be better educated on a whole to best advise and mentor our minority students. And so having brown bag seminars around culturally aware mentorship, graduate student mental health, and as well as academic life coaching and giving those opportunities for students are all things that have emerged recently. I'm going to stop there because I know the next speaker has more to say on this topic, but these all go hand in hand. We have to educate our faculty as well to try to create a more inclusive environment. And thank you all so much for your time and attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Crossley, for that wonderful presentation. Finding a supportive community, which you were able to do through the Lighting the Pathway program, is crucially important. As an African-American woman who was the first African-American woman to graduate from the College of Engineering at my university, I know how important that is, that students feel that sense of community and feel that they belong. So thank you so much for creating those opportunities for our students. Next, we will welcome to the stage Dr. Joanne Leidy. Dr. Leidy will be talking about programs that address faculty development and mentoring. Dr. Leidy came to Boise State University in July of 2017 from the University of Utah and the National Science Foundation, where she was a division director since October 2013. She currently serves as the Dean of the College of Engineering and Professor of Mechanical and Biomedical Engineering at Boise State University. I encourage you all to read the bios for all of our presenters today, because having met her very briefly today and after having read her bio, I am definitely a fangirl now of Dr. Leidy, and I look forward to hearing your talk. I again encourage everyone to please post your questions in the Q&A section. Thank you and welcome to the stage, Dr. Leidy.
Thank you so much. It is a privilege to be here and to present. I'm gonna just start with a little bit about myself. As mentioned, I am at Boise State University and I came from the University of Utah. And so my entire academic life, I have been an engineer for 40 years and I'm finishing my 33rd year in academics, have been at predominantly white institutions. And so if you go to the next slide, I think my take on mentoring starts really with the environment, as the last speaker mentioned, that I am trying to create in terms of the College of Engineering here at Boise State. And I really take seriously the fact that as a leader, it is my job to really create that environment. One of the first things I did was to change our mission statement. The mission tagline was, we have an unshakable focus on student learning. And I intentionally changed that to learning because I wanted to be inclusive in a learning environment for not only our students, who are incredibly important, the reason why we're here, but also our staff and faculty. And I think some of what I'm going to talk about today really aligns not so much with programs, or a formal program, but with creating that opportunity to empower all to solve those world complex challenges. And that certainly goes toward our faculty, and our values also show this of innovation, inclusion, and integrity. I think as a leader, this is really important. This was voted on by our college. so that as I move through the resources that we have, I can be very intentional about those. As I mentioned, the next slide, we don't have a formal mentoring program. And the reason for that is we're only 25 years old. When I first came here, we had 15 tenure track faculty in computer science and 2 full professors. And so the challenge of that is not only mentoring minority faculty, but also mentoring early career faculty where there's just not a lot of senior faculty. There was also a shift in Boise State from being predominantly an undergraduate institution to developing a research environment. And so I spent a lot of time over the last 5 years in what I would call faculty development, really providing faculty the opportunity to have a grant strategist. This is not an expert. This is not a grant writer. This is the organizer of your thoughts. And so as our faculty write career awards, they share those with one of our grant strategists. They look at that, make sure their message is being told to the best of their ability. So it's really looking at creating what you want to be as a researcher. There's also a National Science Foundation grant that was awarded for a CERT program, which also works one-on-one with faculty to really help them develop their research strategies and where they want to go with their research program. The second piece, really the second 2 are very important to me. When I came, reviews were done, different cycles every 2 years here. It's so important to give honest feedback and give it often. There was a form that said, is this person making progress toward tenure? And it was yes and no. Well, that doesn't give anybody the feedback that they need to improve. And it's left very unclear if you're not sure. And that's the same thing with policies, in my opinion. I think the policies, need to be written down, unbiased, and they need to be followed. And I'm going to talk a little bit about unbiased policies a little bit later on. But I think this is a real important thing to look at, because those policies that aren't written down are the unknown things. Some of the policies that I worked on, there was a FNA return module or practice that all the FNA went back to a PI. So if you were an early career faculty and a co-PI, you didn't get any return back into your account. And so now we have a form where that's all laid out. So some of them are really simple. Some of them are more complicated. We had a dean's evaluation policy, which was driven by a survey that was very biased, in my opinion. And it took quite a while to work with Academic Senate to turn those around so that we know there's biases against women as well as minority faculty, and really looking at those surveys shows some of those biases, which then goes to somebody's tenure if you're untenured, or if you're a dean, raise pools and things like that. And so making sure those are unbiased. Next slide. This has already been talked about a lot, about building, I call them safe communities, or communities where people feel like they belong. And the previous speaker talked a lot about communities. If you are the only one that looks like you, it's really hard. And that is very true. I mentioned I've been an engineer for 40 years. I was the second female hired at my former university. And so when you're looking around and you're the only one in the room, it's very difficult. We don't have a lot of minority faculty. So one way that I try and do this is to ensure that the communities that those people feel attached to are available for them. The supportive communities, as the GEM program talked about, making sure that our faculty are connected to SHIP or NSBE or those societies where they can join with people. I have actually also, we have a community here that we build around females, but because there's more of them than minorities, and really trying to make sure that my office is open to be a safe place for them as well. Next slide. So I did want to say, I mentioned that mentoring is not a formal program at Boise State. It wasn't when I was at the University of Utah either, but there's some things that I think are really important as we look at forming a mentoring program here at Boise State. Next slide. I think there are policy, but there's also unknowns. And the first speaker talked about, what do I wear to work? Those are some of the unknowns, things that aren't in policies and they can't really be read. And being that person that's willing to talk to an early career faculty about, well, you may not know this part, but you can do this and this or this. It's interesting because just, I think yesterday I was meeting with a faculty candidate for one of our departments, and it was a female, and she was asking me about startup packages, and I finally said, okay, I'm going to put my senior faculty hat on right now, and let me help you navigate this. It's a little embarrassing because you'll be negotiating with me and I'm telling you how to negotiate, but really trying to help her as she tries to do her journey to understand what are the things you can ask for and not ask for, because I think those are really important. And I take that very seriously as a leader to help people understand what are those unknowns that I can ask for in a startup package or not. I think one of the most important things is to acknowledge experiences and don't deny or marginalize people's experiences. I think it was Virginia Valen who said at a meeting I was in, you know, I can't tell you, I'm sure all of you have heard, don't make a mountain out of a molehill, right? Well, a bunch of molehills eventually make a mountain. And many of our faculty have so many things that are an extra tax on them, that those just tend to come on and to come on. And I can't tell you, when somebody experiences, again, from my perspective, something against being a female, and people will say, well, I've never had that happen. Well, that doesn't mean they didn't have it. And a good mentor always acknowledges experience. As dean, I never say, well, that could never happen in my college. Like, well, I'm very sorry that that was your experience. And to try and acknowledge how a person is feeling or the incident that they went through. The other important piece that I really think is important is that somebody has multiple mentors. And I always tell people this, there are many paths to success. We are all based on ours, and I suggest that you talk to a lot of different people. The next slide is something that somebody just asked me. As a mentor, also be an accelerator. So this is the person that is going to nominate you to be a member of AAAS or nominate you to be a fellow of IEEE. And so make sure that you are an accelerator, as well as, if you are being mentored, have an accelerator. And the final slide is something that's really hard. As a dean, as a person who's trying to diversify faculty, I have to be prepared to sometimes mentor somebody out of a position. And I have done this with some staff. At times, I don't really like the way I put it, square peg, round hole, but I truly believe I want to empower people to achieve their fullest potential. And for some reason, the position they're in, the institution they're in, the job they're in is not doing that. And I can sometimes see that and suggest to them, maybe you need to think about moving on to something different. And that's all I have. And thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Leidy. Like I said, I am now an official fangirl of yours and will be watching your progress as you move forward. I thank you so much for your participation on the panel. Thanks for sharing with us about the importance of mentoring and for encouraging students to build a community by belonging to organizations like SHIP or NSBE or SWE. That's crucial. So thank you again for your talk. I'd like to invite all of our panelists back to the stage. Please join me on stage. And at this point in our program, we want to open it up for questions and answers. I have questions. However, our audience has submitted some questions, and I encourage our audience to continue to do that. There's still more time for questions. Our first question is for Sandra. Sandra, thank you for your presentation. What are some of the goals specific to the student experience? Oh, just lost it. Okay. What are some of the goals specific to the student experience for your internship program?
So one goal of mine, know that they are supported because they've already made it through, some good academic credentials. Otherwise, will not be able to hire them at Sandia. But they've made it through that piece. Now, I'm their champion for the workplace, and that goes far beyond their internship. I try to stay in contact with my interns as much as they would like to stay in contact with me. And I try to support them outside of the internship program, just knowing that there's someone like myself that will be there for them when they need support, letters of recommendation, award nominations, glad to do it, all of those things. The other goal is hands-on real time. I mentioned this in my talk, but what is happening now in supporting technical work with tribes with renewable energy? Time is not the same as it is on reservation time and with tribal projects. It's just that concept has to be experienced. The other, distance is another piece. Driving long distances to get from one part of a state to another, and it's the same tribal nation. It's just baffling. Some students just have never understood distance and rule. What do I mean by rule? You'll feel it. You can't find an ATM anywhere and you can't get a cell phone signal. So the realities of what we're trying to do with our credentials and our engineering degrees are taking on community projects like this. You have to understand all of those dynamics. The other goal is also my own personal one, is that I want my colleagues to see other people like me in the workplace so that they can say, hey, that looks like one of Sandra's students has said before. It's like, yeah, I wanted you to see a handsome young man with long black hair, very academically credentialed, because he's going to be a great engineer. You just have to get used to somebody who looks different than you. So that's the short answer.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. Next question is for Brennan. And Brennan, this is a 4-part question, so I'll be glad to repeat if you need me to. What are the largest barriers to scale up this program? That's part 1. Are there enough applicants? Part 2. Excuse me. So I'll go over, let me start again. What are the largest barriers to scale up this program? Are there enough applicants? Are there enough industry members? And lastly, what would it take to get more graduate students in the program?
Thank you. Fantastic. And actually all of those are sort of tied together because GEM right now is on a 10-year strategy to what we'd like to call best in class. And the current phase that we're in is what we call aggregator mode, which means more of everything. And so the current challenge that we face is that we have about 2,000 applications for a GEM fellowship every year. And once the dust settles, about close to 1,000 of those individuals are folks that are truly eligible to receive a GEM fellowship. For instance, this year, we will probably place close to 450 of those. So we're still not at a point where we're even placing half of that community. And it's a weird scenario to exist because, as I'm sure all of you have seen, we still go to conferences where we hear folks say, we can't find the talent. And so it's hard for that phenomena to exist and be in an organization where you release that underrepresented talent in the hundreds. And so I've always viewed this problem when I walked into this role over 5 years ago as an awareness issue. because in raising the awareness of the GEM model, something that folks that individuals like Percy Pierre and now members of the board like Felicia Benton Johnson over at Georgia Tech, etc., have worked hard to create, that needs to be socialized and magnified so that everyone is aware that this successful model exists, because there's no reason why such a simple goal as placing 1,000 underrepresented minorities within these programs and into pathways towards academia and industry and entrepreneurship can't be done simply. There's certainly more corporations out there than 1,000 students. And so I think awareness is probably the largest challenge, and that traverses through the other components of the question. Do we need more applicants? Absolutely. Because there are more students out there that if they don't have these pathways, they take those aspirations that they have for STEM, they'll place it on the shelf and they'll go get a job. And then if we ultimately care about scientific impact, the worst thing you can do is lose these individuals that have the passion for it already. And so, yes, the more students, more employers that want to sponsor students, more and more of everything is really because we're in aggregator mode, our biggest challenge. And so having a community that can amplify this message is something that I believe will greatly allow GEM to grow.
Thank you so much. And before I move on to the next question, I just want to read a statement that's one of the participants put into the Q&A. And this is again for Brennan. My experience with successive students that have internship has been phenomenal. Former students, Tesla, Intel, Meta, and Divya. How to significantly increase internships. GEM is a superb model. So a little feedback from our audience I wanted to share with you.
Thank you.
Next question. You're welcome. Thank the audience members, and thank GEM. So the next question, I'm going to open it up for any of you to please respond if you feel so inclined. Master's degrees can be a critical step for pathways from BS to PhD. How do we develop better pipelines and support structures for MS programs? And how you get faculty buy-in / culture shift for MS student support? Anyone want to take a stab at that? Joanne, you look poised.
I know. That's really hard coming from a former R1 where PhDs are sort of the students you want. One of the things that I've been exploring, and this doesn't exactly answer the question, but is the master's degree for engineering and how we incorporate, we call them accelerated masters, sometimes it's a 5-year program. And how do we really take and so this and support students maybe in that first 5th year and then start really getting them adjusted. When I went to school, I was thinking, I just want to get master's degree and that's all I want, and then became a PhD student. And so might we use that last senior year to be that first MS year, or do professional masters where they're in school and it's a project-based thing to get them into that idea of a research environment. And so that doesn't exactly answer the question, but I think it's a hard way. If you're writing grants and doing things and you're a PhD granting institution, it's a hard thought process for master student support in some ways.
Thank you very much for that.
Just to add to that, I think it kind of goes against some of the culture where programs are trying to increase ranking. One thing that I've personally done, and this is not easy because it does go against that model where you want to promote more PhD students, but to have more advocates in your program to believe in students. And so what I've done whenever there's a good minority student or someone that just has a lot of potential is we treat them like PhD students. We say, okay, if you have even an inkling of hope for continuing as a PhD, I'm going to give you the same stipend level or something like that to allow you to pursue your master's. This gives you longer time to commit, but then you have to convince your fellow faculty that this person is interested in potentially pursuing a PhD after that. So we've had several success stories where people take that stepping stone approach. It's harder whenever you are pushing, because I'm also the graduate recruiter for our department. But that is one approach that is successful. And to me, whenever you get one of these kids, if they end up getting a lot of job offers after that and they are successful, that's not a failure, right? They're still amazing kids. They're still going to go change the world. But that's one approach, is to pay your master's students just like you would and treat them just like you would a PhD, because you want them to become one of them eventually.
Yeah, and to add one more thought is Boise State is very involved in undergraduate research, as I'm sure many places are. And so again, that's an opportunity to get undergraduates involved, to say this is a research area that you might be interested in, and working with PhD students again, so that kind of reduces that thought barrier of, can I do this or not?
Well, I want to take this opportunity to thank you all again for your amazing presentations this afternoon. We have learned a lot from you. I'm sure we have a lot more to learn. You generated a lot of questions, which unfortunately we were not able to get to all of the questions that were in the Q&A tab. So I encourage those individuals who did ask a question, who we did not have an opportunity to get to direct your question directly to the panelist who you'd like to speak to. I'm sure that they'll be happy to respond. And again, thank you for your time. Thank you for your participation. We are now going to take a short break, and we'll see you on the other side. Thank you.
Okay, hello everyone, and thank you to our panelists. Before we go into break, please answer the question that was just posted in the poll about your experiences thus far. And we will do a short break and then move into breakout discussions. As we're doing the breakout discussions today, please sit with any potential collaborators that you've identified. If you have a group that you've already talked about working with, please sit at tables 1 through 5. Or you can sit at any of the other tables and meet new people. And once you're seated, please pull up the whiteboard and begin answering the questions. We're going to have a short report back session. And please be prepared to report on your collaborations or ideas. And this might also be a good time to seek out new collaborators. And right now, we're going to show the results of the poll as it's coming in. Again, the poll question is in the general chat, and please answer it, and we will look at the results.